All right, welcome to session 4 of Strategic Management in a Post-Christian Era. Again, my name is Justin with Ekklesia. We are continuing to explore how ancient biblical wisdom actually impacts the modern business environment. And tonight we are going to be looking at taking an external assessment of your organization in order to determine what are the opportunities that are available to you to expand your business, to grow your business, to enter new markets, and then also to identify certain threats that would prevent you or hinder you in any way from taking the proper strategies and to implementing them so that you get the results that you're looking to get for your business or your organization. So, session 4, the external assessment. When we think about there was a man named Paul, and he was charged with bringing about the believing obedience of the nations. So he was sent out into different cultures and different areas that he'd maybe read about because he grew up in a college town, so he was well educated. But he'd never actually experienced a lot of this stuff firsthand until he was actually sent into these scenarios. And once there, he had to kind of identify the lay of the land, and we talked about that a little bit last session. And he experienced a lot of hostility towards himself in bringing this new way of life into areas that were really dying in behaviors that were counterproductive to human existence, really. And so, in the process of this, he endured frequent journeys, traveled quite a lot as business people. We know that's something we constantly have to deal with, the airport and all that. In danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from his own people, danger from outsiders, dangers in the city, dangers in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers or people who are pretending that they were for him but they really weren't, toil and hardship, and through many sleepless nights. Now, I don't know about you guys, but any of us who have been doing business for any length of time have actually experienced some of this as we try and take this product or service into the community, because we have all sorts of different factors that work against us in order for us to be successful. Of course, we have a lot of things working for us too, especially if we're seeking the Lord's will in how we do business and how we impact the community through our organizations. So tonight, as we do an external assessment, what we're going to be identifying is these different forces that impact the business from outside of itself. And the essence of an external audit is one of the first things that we're going to talk about, the relationship between external forces and your organization. What are some of the impacts that happen there? We're going to be looking at Porter's 5 forces model, sources of external information. We're going to take a brief look at some forecasting tools and techniques, and we can kind of go into that in a little bit more detail in our conversation time. We're going to look at global challenges, and basically we're going to take all this information and we're going to develop a matrix that's going to allow us to kind of give ourselves a score like we did with the internal assessment as far as where we are with regard to the position we have in light of all these external forces that are bearing down upon our organization, both for good, where we can identify opportunities, and for things that we need to be wary of, any threats to the organization, threats to the viability of the business. And then finally, we're going to take that and we're going to put it into a competitive profile matrix, where we're going to take kind of the results from that first matrix and we're going to set it side by side with some of our major competition in the area, so that we can identify where we need to kind of focus some of our resources to build up our organization and to build up our product line, so that we can be more competitive and be more of a long-term player in whatever field of business you happen to be in. So the essence of an external audit. An external audit is environmental scanning or industry analysis. You're basically going to look at what your business is, having already kind of identified a lot of that as we identified our strengths and weaknesses last session. Now, what does that look like in the context of the environment here in Statesville? What does your competition look like here locally? If you're selling online, what does your online competition look like? Even if you're not selling online, your customers are buying online. And that means that if you're selling a product that's priced significantly higher than a customer can get it online, most likely you're losing business that you could have otherwise gained. And maybe one of the only ways that you can compete with the online pricing is to have an online presence yourself, thereby boosting your overall sales so you can drive your costs down. Identify a finite list of opportunities and a finite list of threats. Again, we could spend really hours and hours and months identifying all the different forces that impact our business, from the very macro view even down to the things that are going on here locally in Statesville. But what we want to do is we want to get about 10 to 20 different factors to get a good quantitative look at what we're doing with regard to our position within the external context. So then we have the 5 wide-ranging categories that we're going to be looking at. Economic forces, a group called the social, cultural, demographic, and environmental forces, political, governmental, and legal forces, technological forces, and competitive forces. All of these things impact your business. And so the more aware you are of how they interrelate, the more you're going to be in a position to make decisions that are informed and decisions that are going to help you to be successful. So relationships between external forces and an organization. Your competitors. You're all in business to make money. So there should be a healthy competition there. And actually that's a good thing. From a biblical discipleship point of view, we call that iron sharpening iron. So it says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens his brother. And so the idea is that if you do really well at bringing a quality product to market, you are upping the game on your competition, which means that they're actually going to have to do a little bit better too. And that's going to positively impact the local community, because that means that the consumers in the area are going to be getting better products and better services, because it behooves the business owners to offer the best product or service and to continually try to offer the best product or service that they can, or value. We're going to be looking at that strategy with regard to that as we go forward this evening as well. Your suppliers, how are your relationships with your suppliers? Do you have multiple suppliers? This can help you also to make sure that you have buying power with your suppliers, making sure that you can get what you need when you need it in order to produce the product or service that your organization produces. And so that's something that you have to be aware of, what's available to you, and make sure that you're shopping and getting the best deal, because that's going to result in your customers getting the best product at the best value. Distributors, as you're taking your product and service and you're getting it to the marketplace, what does that look like? What are your processes of distribution to, do you own a small retail store, or are you manufacturing a product and you ship to different stores? Or maybe you manufacture a product and you sell directly to the customer online. There's a number of different things that you could be doing in order to get these products to market. Creditors. If you are doing any sort of debt financing for your business, again, this has to come down to having smart relationships with your bankers and making sure that you have the funds available to you for working capital, for additional funds for projects or strategies that you decide to implement. If you choose to use debt financing, making sure that you do so wisely. Customers. What does your relationship with your customer look like? Do you have excellent customer service? And if not, why not? Because if your relationships with your customers aren't well, that's going to be a significant problem for your business. And how can you really develop a strong customer relationship, a strong customer retention in this marketplace where, honestly, most consumers know I can go right across the street and get the same product or something similar. So if they are out of line at all with the way that they treat me, then I'll walk to the next place. And so the consumer knows that they kind of are in the driving seat with regard to these things. So are you doing the best you can to get the product to the customer in a way that they perceive the value, not only of the product, but of the organization that stands behind it? That's you guys and your team. And so how are you focusing on that? Are you developing your people to be better at that? Very, very important. Employees. How are you developing your people? But even before we get to that, how are you doing your hiring? How are you doing your onboarding? How do you do your ongoing assessments and developing your employees so that they become the best that they can be? So, I mean, your employees are typically going to be a lot of times the face of your company, who your customers deal with, and you want to make sure that you have people whom you feel comfortable vesting your resources in to be able to do what you have essentially called them to do. Communities. What's going on in the community, and what kind of a footprint does your organization have within the community to bring positive change in an ongoing basis to the people who live around? Because that's going to develop goodwill in the hearts and minds of the people, so that they can know that they can trust you. You're an organization who actually cares about more than just making money, and that is extremely important to people in my generation and the next generation that are coming up. That you are actually you are an organization who's not just out for money. So social responsibility and how you impact the community is absolutely important. Managers. How are your managers doing? Are they leading the people well? Is their planning effective? Is their ability to motivate and encourage the workforce to where they really feel like they're part of something? What does that look like in your organization versus those things that are going on in organizations outside of your specific organization? Stockholders, people who have vested monies in your organization, they expect to receive dividends a lot of time, or capital gains. What does your communication with your stockholders or investors look like in comparison to those other business entities who are vying for the same investments and the same dollars for their organizations? How do you manage those relationships? Labor unions, if there are labor unions, how do you interact with those? Do you do so on a regular basis? Do you make sure that you are well communicated with the unions? Governments, how does local, state, and federal government impact your business? Everything from taxes to certain legislations that will impact what your organization is responsible for, as far as meeting the different requirements. If you own a restaurant, making sure all of your food handling is proper, making sure that if you handle chemicals in your organization at a manufacturing plant or something like that those chemicals are handled properly. Not just because you have to, but because you genuinely care about being a positive impact on the environment where God has planted your organization. So these are all things that we need to consider, how they impact our business from the outside, and how also our competitors are kind of dealing with these things. Economic variables to be monitored. There's a whole slew of these, but credit availability, interest rates, inflation rates, government budget deficits, consumption patterns, unemployment trends, worker productivity levels. What do these things look like here in Statesville? Because that's going to impact the productivity of your business, and that's going to impact how well you're able to bring your product or service to market. So taking into account economic variables that you want to keep an eye on. How often should you keep an eye on stuff like that? That's something that you're going to have to decide how much you want to invest in it. I would say, semi-annually, annually at minimum, though, to kind of look and see and reevaluate where you are versus a year ago. That would be minimum. Social, cultural, demographic, and environmental forces. Some different variables to think of. Special interest groups in the area. Social responsibility. What is the population rate doing in the area? Do you have a lot of deaths? Do you have a lot of births? What's going on in the lives of the people here in Statesville that is going to impact your business? Being aware of these things and the trends in these things is going to help you to make decisions in your business and to plan for these things. Per capita income is a major one. The per capita income here in Statesville is relatively low compared to Charlotte or with Raleigh. Obviously, much bigger cities, but Statesville is a place that has tremendous opportunity to bring businesses here and to increase that per capita income so that the people here have a larger a larger discretionary income that they can spend in your businesses, essentially. Their discretionary income that they can spend, here in the downtown area, or that they can spend in buying additional property, or that they can invest if you have a broker dealer or some sort of an investment firm. All of these things are going to impact how your business does what it does, the types of products and services that are going to be successfully placed here in Statesville, and so these are things that you want to kind of keep an eye on and consider utilizing as we're developing this matrix. Like I said, we want to have like about 10 to 20 of these different factors from the different sections to get a good feel of where we are within the context that we find ourselves. Political, governmental, and legal forces. Government regulation and deregulation can make a huge impact. In my particular business and banking and finance, in around 79 or 80, there was a significant deregulation that allowed stockbrokers to charge much less on commissions so that people could actually trade stocks for as little as like $50, whereas before they'd be paying $100, $200, $300 to do the same transaction. So by government deregulation, all of a sudden things become more accessible, and that opened a whole nother area of business that was available where you could offer trades to people at a reasonable price. Right about 1996, we started having the online trading began to happen, and the people that jumped on board with this new technology, they had to make a decision. Do we want to be an online firm? Do we want to have an online presence? And the early movers in that change in technology really reaped the benefits of it. So being aware of how government regulation or deregulation affects your business is absolutely important. Voter participation rates, the number and severity of and location of government protests, any antitrust legislation. If you are able to somehow find yourself in a position of a monopoly without having the government pressing in on you and forcing you to change directions, to be able to have the corner of a market in a specific demographic is a good thing for the business perspective, as long as you don't have the government kind of on top of you with it. So being aware of antitrust legislation so that you don't get stuck with a bunch of fines and stuff like that. You want to be aware of those things. Government fiscal and monetary policy. This is obviously, you're all familiar with paying taxes locally and being able to contribute to the local environment through the tax base. But also, we're business people. We would much rather take the funds that we receive from our customers, our net profits, and be able to contribute to the community according to the way that we choose to, rather than the way the government chooses to. So in most situations, we want to find how we can most legitimately stay in the lowest tax bracket possible for your particular organization, and that's going to be important in staying on top of what are the tax laws, what are the tax rates, what are the tax breaks, finding out those things both locally on the state level and of course the federal level. Technological forces. Technology that currently affects your business. What technologies are you using now? What's available to you? Are you staying on top of new technologies that are coming out and preparing yourself for those things? Absolutely important. There's some tremendous technology available to us, even in the context of strategic management. There's some great software packages out there that will help you with this whole strategic management process to be able to take all the data that you're collecting, put it in a specific program, and get the results that you need relatively easily. The value of technology, speed of communications. Is your organization large enough to utilize a CIO, a Chief Information Officer, or a Chief Technology Officer? Can they add value to your organization? If they're able to, on an ongoing basis, monitor these things and save you money by identifying opportunities and threats and taking hold of your strengths and weaknesses and dealing with those at an early stage, so important. and how your technology actually impacts that is going to be really paramount. Overseeing technological footprint, do you have? How do you do that? A lot of us in here are part of small businesses, so we pretty much do it ourselves, and if we don't do it, it just doesn't get done. And we've got so much stuff going on that we may or may not get to those sorts of things, and if not, we just kind of truck along and do the best that we can. Well, we have to be more intentional about that. Learning to be more intentional about that and managing our time wisely is going to be it's going to be a deciding factor going forward, because as the business environment here in Statesville develops and matures and hopefully begins to grow more rapidly, it's great that we have our unemployment rate down as low as it is. But again, my hope is to see more high quality jobs, where you have high-quality full-time jobs where people have benefits for their families, and you have the ability for them to have upward mobility within the workforce here in Statesville rather than having to go elsewhere. Wireless and mobile technology that's available, that's an amazing touch point for your business is the mobile devices. Your customers literally have you in their pocket all the time, where they can find out what specials are going on. You can, if you're doing a market penetration strategy where you're sending coupons and discounts to people, you can get those things to your customers with relative ease at low cost, because that opportunity is there. Are you taking advantage of that opportunity? So definitely some factors to consider and how we can maybe do better on those things going forward. So some questions that we want to ask about our competitors, though, as we are looking at these external forces. Obviously, competition within our space is absolutely important. We have to be aware of what they're doing, making sure that we're bringing a product to market that is competitive, that we're bringing service to our customers that is that's talked about. You want to become a household name. When people think or hear about your organization, you want it to evoke positive emotions and positive thoughts. So, what are your major competitors' strengths, and what are your major competitors' weaknesses? What are their objectives and strategies? Obviously, we don't want you doing any corporate espionage or anything. That wouldn't be ethical, but you can pretty much figure out what these things are for your competition, so you can kind of see what they're doing and how you want to respond to that in developing your strategies. How will the major competitors most likely respond to current economic, social, cultural, demographic, environmental, political, all these different things that we're talking about? How is your major competition responding to these things? Are they, if we have something that happens in the media or something that happens in the local community, are they responding that, actually making PR statements, or are they not? Is it something that you would want to do let's say there's a news story that impacts your particular industry? Do you want to speak into that publicly, and do you have the resources to do so wisely? How vulnerable are the major competitors to alternative company strategies? How vulnerable are alternative strategies to successful counterattack by your major competitors? So if you put forth, after evaluating your strengths, your weaknesses, your product, or your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats, and we look at these different strategies that are available to you, and you implement a strategy and you invest in implementing that strategy, how do you think your competition is going to respond to that? You need to think that through ahead of time so that you can be vigilant, and you can be a wise steward of the rollout of that particular strategy. How are our products or services positioned relative to major competitors? Is your pricing in line with your major competitors? Maybe you have a competitor who's a low-cost leader. Maybe their quality isn't quite as good as yours, but you can't touch them on price. Or maybe that's you. There could be a number of different things, but you need to be aware of these things. Questions to ask about your competitors. To what extent are new firms entering and old firms leaving this industry? if you're in an industry that has relatively low barriers to entry, that someone's sitting around thinking, you know what, I want to start a new business in Statesville. What's the easiest business for me to actually get into? If you're in that type of an industry where there's a really low barrier to entry, then you need to really figure out how you can differentiate your product or service so that rather than someone coming in with a new product or a new service that is going to compete with yours, maybe you can bring them on board and utilize their talent ahead of time, and you can kind of, address that ahead, before you have more competition coming into your space. So these are some things to consider. What key factors have resulted in our present competitive position? If you're really good at what you do, know why. Why is it that your customers respond so positively to what you're doing as opposed or over against what your competitors are doing? And exploit that. Take advantage of that, because it means you're doing something well. And so you want to be able to protect that, and you want to be able to continue to develop that so that you maintain that position of competitive advantage. Porter's 5 forces model basically gives us a very simple graphic that we can identify the intensity of rivalry and what impacts that within a certain demographic area where you have businesses competing for the same customers. And that is the power of the customers. If your customers know that they can, again, go someplace else and get a similar product or service, then they have a tremendous amount of buying power, and that's going to result in driving up your game with regard to your customer service and the quality that you offer the community in your product or service. The power of suppliers. If you can't get the products that you need in order to produce the finished product that you're bringing to the community, that puts you at a disadvantage. And so there are some strategies that will help you to kind of deal with that, and we'll talk about that in as we go through this evening. But what is the power of your suppliers? Or do you have suppliers who really genuinely care about your business? Because if they lost your business, that would put them in a bad position. Threat from substitutes. Again, how easy is it for new competition to enter this space and to take business from you because they're offering a new, fresh product, a new or service to the area that it's kind of exciting. And is it something that's going to last, or is it something that's going to kind of fizzle out? This was the idea, we saw this happen in the scriptures when Christianity was first beginning, when this Jesus movement was happening. The chief priests, who were essentially the old guard or the old organization who kind of looked after the whole temple system, and that's kind of how they handled religion back then, when they saw this Jesus movement happening, one of the high priests in charge said, hey, listen, if this is of God, then we can't stop it. But if it's not of God, it'll fizzle out. And he gave us a couple different examples of different movements that began, but they really didn't have the favor of God with them, and so they eventually came to nothing. So there's a lot of wisdom in that as we're entering this community with products and services. Again, honoring God in all that we do. Are we bringing something to bear upon the community that's of value that actually does bring God glory? And threat of market entry. How difficult is it to bring your product or service to market? What are the things that you have to overcome in order to bring these things to market? Do you have to compete with other firms or other organizations to get your product or service into the hands of your customers? Sources of external information. So, all these different things that we want to start considering in order to put together this matrix so that we can discover where we're positioned or how well we're positioned within the local environment. You can get information from investment research. You can utilize search engines, Google, Firefox, a number of different search engines that are free, that are available for you to search for this information. Different directories are published specifically pertaining to, a lot of time, your specific industry. News, magazines, newspapers. The U.S. government has lots of statistics that they publish that will pertain to business both here locally and within the United States and globally. Academic. A lot of times you will have organizations or academic organizations, universities that will be doing business studies, and they will publish certain numbers that will be important for you in making business decisions. Consultants. There's always private consultants that you can bring into your organization that will not only help you with your decision making and help you with how to actually organize and how to go through the strategic management process. It may behoove you, if you've never done strategic management and you've never trained people to do this as well, to bring someone in to work specifically with you and your organization to work through that process, at least until you have a good handle on it, especially a lot of you being small business owners. Forecasting tools and techniques. There are econometric models. This is basically quantitative models is basically where you can take real numbers and basically plug them in, and it can give you an actual result that has meat or meaning to it. It's based on historical relationships against key variables, different regression tools, trend extrapolation to kind of see where things have been going, and then utilize probability and statistics to kind of generate a forecast of that going forward. And then qualitative techniques, sales force estimates, juries of executive opinions, anticipatory surveys or market research, scenario forecasts, Delphi forecasts, brainstorming. Most of us being small business owners, we have access to some of these things. Some of these we might say, well, that sounds a little complicated for what I kind of do on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't really have to be that complicated. We can get into this in the discussion and maybe direct you to some software that'll help you, or some different external resources that you can bring in to assist you in utilizing forecasting techniques. Global challenges. Again, it's so easy to get your products and services into the hands of people outside of the United States, and that's good for us as a nation. When our exports actually exceed our imports, that's a good thing. We always are talking about, buy American, create jobs here in America. Well, if that's what we want to do, then we have to be able to produce a superior product or service at a competitive price, and we have to be able to do that on an ongoing basis, and that is not easy. So if it's something that we want to do, we have to start asking those questions. How can I get my product or service into the hands of somebody in Japan or in France or in South America? What would that look like, and how difficult would that be? Honestly, with the distribution channels that we have through different organizations like FedEx and things like that, and online footprints that you have available to you, you have a lot of potential to be able to expand globally. And you might think to yourself, well, I just have a little store in downtown Statesville, I'm selling soap or something. You can, if you have a good quality product and you're able to kind of make it known in different demographics, and you position yourself well online, man, you can open up some pretty amazing markets and bring your products to some distant lands. And that's a good question. Global challenges: how to gain and maintain exports to other nations, and how to defend domestic markets against imported goods. Transforming from a domestic firm to a multinational corporation. That may be a long way off, but businesses typically start small. So if you grow your business, you may end up having multiple locations, and then the question is, well, what would it take for me to actually, put one of my businesses in London, or one of my businesses in Dubai? You may think to yourself, well, that's kind of crazy, not really thinking about doing any of that. Well, think about Five Guys hamburgers. They basically have two products: burgers and french fries, and they sell some sodas too. And they're a multinational corporation. And so that's a possibility for you. The external factor evaluation matrix, basically the purpose of this tool is to summarize and evaluate these economic, social, cultural, all these different competitive forces that we've talked about, and identify opportunities and threats to our ongoing development as an organization. And very similar to what we did with the internal matrix, we're going to have 5 steps to develop this. And the first step is we're going to list those key external factors, 10 to 20 of them. We're going to include both opportunities and threats. We're going to list the opportunities first and then the threats. We're going to be as specific as possible, looking at percentages, ratios, hard numbers that are going to help you have something that's an objective number. Comparative numbers whenever possible. So that's this first step. So we've got 10 to 20 different factors that we're going to be looking at, opportunities and threats. EFE matrix step number 2. Each of those factors, we're going to give it a weighting. 0.0 means, you know what, it's not important at all. 1.0 means it's very important. So as you weight the different things on your chart, you're going to basically looking at the relative importance of that specific factor to your organization. Opportunities are going to get a higher weight than threats. Threats can receive high weights if they're especially severe or threatening. Appropriate weights can be determined by comparing successful with unsuccessful competitors or by discussing the factor and reaching a group consensus. The sum of all the weights of the factors must equal 1.0. So again, we're going to have you kind of break into groups and discuss these things when we come back from the break, and that's going to basically be what you're going to be doing, is assigning these things. Not tonight, but after our next session. EFE matrix step number 3, assign a 1 to 4 rating to each key external factor to indicate how effectively the firm's current strategies respond to the factor. So 4 basically means that the response is superior. 3, the response is above average. The response is average is a number 2, and number 1, it's a poor. It would be a response would be poor. And the ratings are going to be based on the effectiveness of your firm's strategies. And ratings are company-based, whereas what we did in step 2, the weightings are going to be industry-based. Okay, so again, it's important to note that both threats and opportunities can receive a 1, 2, 3, or 4, which is a little bit different from what we did before. Step number 4, multiply each factor's weight by its rating to determine a weighted score. And then we're going to sum the weighted scores for each variable to determine the total weighted score for our organization. This is a sample EFE matrix, Green Mountain Coffee Roasters. Here we have their opportunities. Global market typically is untapped, increasing in the growth of the industry. Quality considered important by consumers. Increasing trend of specialty coffee drinkers, and growing number of coffee houses. And so they have these weighted, and then they have their different ratings on these, and then the weighted score. Their threats would be value migration from the U.S., shift in consumer priority, increasing size of competitors, and presence of highly recognized brands. And so they ended up with an overall score of 2.15, which puts them really kind of lower than where they want to be. You want to be kind of a 2.5 or higher, would indicate that you're pretty well positioned within those external factors that are impacting the organization. The competitive profile matrix is where we're going to basically take what we learned about our own organization, and we're going to put that up against different competitors in the same industry. So this is you're going to look for major competitors, what their strengths and weaknesses are in relation to your strategic position, and then you're going to look at these internal strengths and weaknesses, and then you're going to kind of set these things side by side. The competitive profile matrix really is going to kind of utilize what we saw both in the internal and in the internal assessment that we did versus our competitor as well. And this competitive matrix could be utilized also for what we talked about, the external factors that we were dealing with. All right, so strategic management model. Let's go back to this this graphic that we saw at the beginning, because this is basically the bird's eye view of what we're doing. We're gathering feedback by doing all this different research, and we are coming up with a strategy formulation, how we're going to implement that strategy, and then we're going to evaluate that strategy so that we make sure that if we got off course of implementing the strategy, that we can realign ourselves with the vision, the mission, and the strategies, making sure that we chose the right strategy. One of the worst things that you can possibly do is sit down and decide on a specific strategy only to find out 5 years down the road that it was the wrong strategy. That would be a problem. So again, develop mission statement and the vision statement was what we talked about at the beginning. We did an external audit, an internal audit, and now we're going to be talking about establishing long-term objectives and generating, evaluating, and selecting strategies. So we're going to be looking at strategies in action. So we're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to kind of put all this together with regard to our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats, what that looks like in the context of our vision statement and the mission that we have set forth for our organizations. And now we're going to start looking at what it means to set long-term objectives and what it means to, and the different strategies that we have available to us. We have about 16 different strategies that we're going to be reviewing and talking briefly about, and then we will discuss in our roundtable time when those specific strategies are most useful. So go ahead and take a 15-minute break, and then bring it on back in, and we'll reconvene in, like I said, about 15 minutes. All right, I hope everyone enjoyed your break. We are looking at strategies in action now, and we have essentially, just to kind of bring us all back up to speed, we have looked at and developed a vision statement for our organization. We have looked at and developed a mission statement. We have done some internal research and some external research to find out what our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and our threats. And now we're going to open the playbook that we have in order to be able to choose from a number of different strategies that we can utilize to move forward in our business. But first, we want to talk about what our actual objective is and how we can set those objectives and why they are important. Now, the wisdom that we gain from looking at the Holy Scriptures, going back to the gentleman that we were talking about earlier, this Apostle Paul, who was going into these different environments, bringing the same message, the message of the gospel, that this man, Jesus of Nazareth, had been crucified for their sins, that he was buried, and that God raised him from the dead, and that he was now the true Lord of the world. And so now they should receive this gift of forgiveness of sins and salvation, and to trust in the name of Jesus, God's only Son. So this man is coming into cultures who have never heard of such thing. I mean, a lot of them, maybe they were a little bit familiar with the Jews. They were like this small area on the outskirts of this much larger empire. But he was bringing some very strange things to their hearing. And so when he was doing this, if you read through a lot of, the Apostle Paul actually wrote, I think it was like 13 letters in the New Testament. And you can see in his interactions with different areas and different people groups how he kind of addressed them and how he spoke to them based on who they were and based on what he knew about them, and of course things that were supernaturally revealed to him by the Holy Spirit, so he could connect with them in a way where they could actually receive what he was bringing to them. Again, looking at long-term objectives, his specific ministry was to bring about the believing obedience of the nations in order that they might really take hold of this life that is truly life. And so to go into an area and to make learners or to make disciples of the nations really would have been a very difficult thing to do. And as you are looking to take your business, your product or service, and bring it into a certain area, a certain community, and have it be well received, we have to think about, well, what is your specific objective? Rather than just, I just kind of go to work and I show up and I kind of do the same thing every day, and some customers show up and they buy some stuff and make a little bit of money, and I kind of just, that's what I do. It's not broke. Why, I don't have to fix it. There's a lot of management that goes on, especially in small business, that really doesn't look at, setting these long-term goals. And long-term goals, I'm talking maybe like 2 to 5 years. And these goals or these objectives, they should be SMART. It's an acronym, okay? So it should be SMART. S for it should be specific. M for measurable. A, it should be agreed upon by those who are going to be contributing to attaining to the objective. R, it should be reasonable. And then finally, T, it should be time-bound. In other words, you want to accomplish this objective within a certain time frame. So SMART objectives are going to be so important moving forward. I grew up, my mom owned a little country diner, and man, she did the best that she knew how. And after I graduated from college, university, and studying business and finance, she actually ended up selling the restaurant. So I never got to actually bring the things that I learned into that space to help her with that. And so she really struggled with a lot of these things, and a lot of times it was just managing by crisis. Things would happen, things would go wrong, and we'd have to kind of readjust with this or that, or maybe we'd be sitting around talking about something and, hey, why don't we try this? And so it was it really didn't have a lot of structure to it, and I think that we probably could have been better or done better if we were more well informed with things like strategic management. So the nature of the long-term objectives, they should be SMART goals or SMART objectives. Not managing by objectives can be less than beneficial. It can cause wastes of money. It can cause your people not to be on board with specifically the direction that the organization is going, versus if you set that objective in place, and by meeting those objectives every 2 to 5 years, you find yourself moving closer and closer to the realization of the vision statement. So long-term objectives, absolutely important to identify and set those, because also that's going to inform your strategy. As you develop strategy, your strategy should be leading you to obtaining the objective. It's going to affect your hiring practices. It's going to affect how you organize your business. And so these are milestones that you're going to be encouraging your people to attain to, and you're going to have to work to keep them motivated and on track to reaching these objectives. So setting these and involving people in that communication process, just like you did with the setting of the writing of the vision statement, the mission statement, you want to be involving, of course, your managers, but also as many people as possible, because the better the communication, the more likely you are to actually attain to these objectives. So types of strategies, we have about 16 different types of strategies that we're going to be talking about this evening, including basically some very generic strategies, 3 generic strategies that we're going to be looking at. But first we're going to look at integration strategies, forward integration, backward integration, and horizontal integration. Basically, forward integration is where, let's say you produce a specific product and you bring that product to your customers by shipping to different retail stores. A forward integration would be to acquire those distribution points. So you're manufacturing the product and you're owning the distribution points, so that you're gaining more control over that front line, so that you know what your customers are experiencing there, and making sure that your products are sold well and that they're serviced well. Backward integration would be, for instance, let's say you owned a coffee shop, and you and your partners in the coffee shop took a trip to Colombia where you met with some farmers, and you found a group who was willing to sell their farm to you for a certain amount of money that was reasonable, that would put you in a position of having more control over your suppliers, so that you can bring your raw materials to your store at a lower cost and grow the business that way. Horizontal integration would be saying, okay, if I own, for instance, a small grocery store, acquiring a competitor's location would be a horizontal integration. So those are different ways that you can choose to grow your business by integrating. Intensive strategies would include market penetration, market development, and product development. Market penetration basically says, I've got a great product or service, but I'm not getting it into the people's possession as effectively as I can. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out a marketing strategy so we can inform people of our value proposition and why they should buy our product as opposed to those of our competitors. So we're going to be sinking some cash, some funds into our marketing efforts, and we're going to explore what the best way to do that is going to be, and that would be a market penetration. So you're staying in the same market, you're servicing the same customers, but you're getting your products into the hearts and minds of your customers more effectively. Market development. You're saying, okay, we've been doing business here in downtown Statesville for a while. We pretty much got a lock on the market, but I want to grow the business. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to find out other ways to get our product or services to new groups of people. Whether that's opening a new location, whether that's going online and starting an online store or expanding your online presence, that would be market development. Product development, looking at your existing product or service and saying, how can we improve upon this? How can we add some new products, some exciting things that are going to be, wow, that's something totally fresh, something's totally new to that organization. So you actually are going to get your customers excited about improved products or additional products that you can, that they can be. Apple Computer would be, a power player in this particular area of product development. Great strategy to increase the productivity of your business. Diversification strategies. Concentric strategies is essentially bringing new, similar products to market. Horizontal strategies, you're going to bring new, completely different products to your customer base. And your conglomerate diversification, you're actually going to have different businesses and different customers than you've ever had before, and that's essentially what you're going to be able to kind of diversify your product line. So concentric strategies, you're going to have similar products. Horizontal strategies, you're going to have new products that are different, but you're basically selling to the same customer base. And conglomerate diversification is taking those products or taking completely new products to the marketplace. Some of your big players in conglomerates would be like General Electric. They make everything from light bulbs to jet engines. So that would give you an idea of diversifying your business in the form of a conglomerate. Defensive strategies. This is a place where you don't really want to be. A defensive strategy is saying, okay, the way that the business is going right now, we're actually going to enter a period of retrenchment. We're going to need to sell off some assets in order to shore up some monies because we're not actually accomplishing what we're set out to do. And so we're going to kind of pull back, maybe focus more on our core competencies, etc. Divestiture is where you're going to be actually selling whole divisions of your organization. A lot of times if you get into a conglomerate strategy where you have multiple businesses going on and you say to yourself, you know what, we've gotten into businesses that really, we're okay at it, but we're not making money, so we're going to be shutting down and liquidating this portion of the business and that portion of the business. And so it's more than just selling off assets. Like with retrenchment, you're actually selling off, entire divisions of your business. And finally, liquidation is looking at the organization and saying, listen, we're going to sell off the entire organization. We're going to piece it out to different places and kind of withdraw from this particular market or from this business. So defensive strategies are something that kind of your exit strategy. A lot of people never think of that though. When you start thinking about, I want to start a business, and I'm so excited about it, I got some great business ideas, and I've got the financing, got the business plan, and people don't really think about their exit strategy because you are in business to make some sort of a a positive impact, whether it's a financial goal or objective, or whether it's impacting the community. When you find that you're not doing that as effectively as you intended to, and it's actually counterproductive to what you're trying to do, then what is your exit strategy? How do you get out of this without losing a lot of money and time and resources? So things to plan for ahead of time is what you would utilize these defensive strategies for, being aware of how you want to kind of back off the gas pedal, so to speak. Other strategies in action: joint venture and combination strategies. A joint venture is where you might say, okay, our organization is really good at this, and their organization is really good at that. So we're going to start a third organization where we're going to actually partner with them, and we're going to bring a new product or service to the marketplace. And I think by doing that, we're going to be able to gain some synergy between our two organizations so that we can be successful by doing it that way. Then you have combination strategies. This is one where you might say do a product development strategy and simultaneously be working on some sort of a conglomerate diversification. So you want to bring a market penetration. So you're basically going to be building this conglomerate, but launching a marketing platform in order to inform the demographic that you're going to be servicing or providing your product to, and you're going to be informing them in a way that this product is going to roll out successfully. It's going to hopefully be anticipated, so that they're able to get that diversity of product or services from your conglomerate organization, and know that they're going to get the quality and the service that you're intending them to receive because you're communicating your message well. Then we come to Michael Porter's Generic Strategies. Now, Michael Porter wrote some pretty amazing books that were utilized in the 80s with regard to this topic. And basically, he had three generic strategies that he talked about: cost leadership strategies, differentiation strategies, and focus strategies. So cost leadership is basically saying, you know what, we want to be the most cost-effective provider of this particular service for this demographic. So we're going to find out what everybody else is charging, and we're going to find out a way to do it for the lowest cost. And so that would be a cost leadership strategy. Differentiation strategy would be producing a product or service that is set apart from anything else within that particular industry. It's like a niche product. Again, going back to the idea of Apple computer and the iPhone or the iPod. These are there's other cell phones that you can buy, but there is a differentiating factor with that particular product. So differentiation strategies can be very helpful. That's one of Porter's generic strategies. And then focus strategies, how you're actually developing a strategy that focuses specifically on bringing that key product or service to the market without, it's almost like taking the differentiation factor to really the next level. You're focused on developing a specific mindset for your customer that sets your organization apart completely. Again, coming back to Apple computer, one of the great examples of that. So mergers and leveraged buyouts. This is a strategy where you may find that combining your organization with another organization in order to realize cost savings, maybe tax savings, maybe reducing workforce costs, combining human resources departments, combining manufacturing departments. You basically would work together with another firm to find out how you can come together as one organization and be able to realize some cost savings or some additional strategic positioning within the marketplace. Leveraged buyouts. This is essentially where the management of a firm is going to buy out the company from shareholders, and they're going to do so by basically financing it. So it's going to be leveraged. This is essentially taking a public company private. So that may or may not pertain to anybody in here, but it is a strategy that is available if you ever find yourself listing on an American stock exchange, New York Stock Exchange, or selling stock in the public markets. So those are some strategies available to you. Strategic management in nonprofit and governmental organization. I was hoping to have a young lady who's got her master's degree specifically in dealing with nonprofits to speak on this, but she wasn't able to make it tonight. But essentially, faith-related nonprofit organizations, education institutions like universities, and medical organizations, these can all benefit, and many of them are already benefiting by implementing strategic management principles. What we talked about, developing a vision, mission statement, the whole process that we looked at, they are realizing a lot of cost savings by utilizing this particular approach to doing business. And again, this wisdom that we have from the ancient scriptures that really speaks into the very core of these processes and the very core of what this process is about in order to do business wisely, that takes into account the best interests both of the people who are involved in the business as well as the employees and as well as the communities that they're serving. So here we have the strategic management, nonprofit, governmental organizations. So any of the strategies that we've looked at can potentially be utilized in one way or another within these types of organizations. Of course, there are going to be differences because there are different tax laws, there are different legal structures for these, so all of that would have to be considered, but the process is pretty much the same with regard to strategic management. Strategic management in small firms. Does this process apply to your organization? Well, you guys are still here, so I assume that you're getting something from this. And as we enter into our roundtable discussions, my hope is that we're able to identify how some of these maybe higher level concepts can be brought down to a level of usability and benefit for you and for your organizations if you're here and you're involved in a smaller organization. So the process of strategic management still is very effective. Knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, knowing the opportunities and threats that exist, and again having just the idea of having a written vision and mission statement in order to unify your team is absolutely a positive a move in a positive direction. Going back to the strategic management model, just to remember, always being hungry for feedback, and that feedback is going to go into and inform these different tasks and these different processes that we're going to be being involved in: strategy formulation, implementation, and evaluation. So again, we've already talked about developing vision and mission statement. We've looked at doing a internal audit and an external audit, and how to quantify our findings through those different matrices that we developed. We looked at establishing long-term objectives and why that's so important. 2 to 5 year objectives or goals, making sure those goals are SMART goals, and generating, evaluating, and selecting strategies. So all this has to do with the strategy formulation portion of what we're discussing. And as we move forward, we're going to be talking more about establishing policies and annual objectives that's going to basically give us a pathway to achieve these longer-term objectives. And then we'll finally look at allocating resources and eventually get to where we're going to be measuring and evaluating the performance of our organization with regard to the strategies that we actually put in place. So that's kind of a general overview to remind you where we are in the process. And going back to our friend Paul, with frequent journeys, danger from rivers, danger from robbers, danger from his own people, danger from outsiders, danger in the city, danger in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship through many sleepless nights. So as much as difficult as it can be to do what you guys do, to bring your product or service to this community, to build up and to equip and to develop the people that are involved in your organization, as difficult as that can be and as stressful as I know that it can be, there are always these opportunities for you to grow as individuals, to grow as a business, to grow as a team, and to positively impact Statesville. So be encouraged that as we work through this process, that this is going to help you to be better positioned to handle the difficulties of business so that you can enjoy the good fruits of strategic management for your business. Again, I thank you guys for showing up tonight, and I thank you for being so attentive. And let's go ahead and get together in a kind of in our focus groups or in our roundtable, and we'll dive into some of these things in more specific detail. Tongues of fire come down, place upon us the crown, confusion be removed, jagged hearts be smoothed. Hear clearly now that every knee should bow. Mashiach's warriors stand tall, evil strongholds fall. We like stones from a brook, a people never forsook. Your sin causing you to grieve, repent and believe. By grace through faith be still, this is God's will.